Hi everyone, my name is Kaylee and I'm an event host for Bank Square Books in Savoy Bookstore and Cafe. We are delighted that you were able to tune in to this evening's virtual event. Just a few pieces of business before we begin. There are some quick setting modifications that we encourage you to make on Zoom that will make the event experience a little more interactive. If you escape full screen, you can activate the chat and Q&A features on Zoom. If you want to participate in the chat, you can set the chat settings to all panelists and attendees. We encourage you to chat in during the event, so be sure to say hello and let us know where you are viewing from. We just ask that you adhere to our virtual event code of conduct, which has already been posted in the chat and will be posted again shortly. You can also ask questions in the Q&A module at the bottom of the screen, as well as upvote those that are most interesting. We will get to audience questions at the end of the event. This event is being recorded, so if you have to leave, the recording will be available at a later date. If you'd like to order a copy of tonight's event book, we will be posting links in the chat throughout the event. This will take you to our website where you can complete your purchase. Without further ado, I'm delighted to introduce Amanda Fairbanks tonight to discuss The Lost Boys of Montauk with us. Amanda Fairbanks is a journalist and author who has worked in the editorial department of the New York Times as a higher education reporter and star. Her writing has appeared in the New York Times, the Boston Globe, Newsweek, The Atlantic, and the San Francisco Chronicle, among other publications. A graduate of Smith College and a former Teach for America Corps member, she has 2 master's degrees from Columbia University's Graduate School of Journalism. The Lost Boys of Montauk, The True Story of the Windblown, 4 Men Who Vanished at Sea, and The Survivors They Left Behind is her first book. The California native lives in New York with her husband and 2 children. Amanda will be in conversation with Rick Foster from The Day. Rick has been working as an arts and culture writer for The Day for almost 20 years. His pieces have appeared in Dallas Observer, Houston Press, Offbeat, and America Way. He is the author of 3 books, and he told me to say that they were the worst-selling books of all time. Amanda and Rick will speak for about 30 minutes, and then we'll open it up to your questions that have been submitted through the Q&A button. And now I'll ask our panelists to turn on their camera and mics, and I'll turn the event over to them.
Thank you so much for that lovely introduction. It's such a pleasure to be here. And hello, Rick.
Hello, Amanda. It is so nice to see you after we have exchanged numerous emails and talked on the phone. And
Absolutely.
I've already discussed this with our Bank Square hosts, Ani and Kaylee, but are you also in air conditioning? Am I the only person here not in air conditioning right now?
So our house is air conditioned. Our office actually is not air conditioned, and which is my husband and I share an office space, and so I'm sitting in that right now, sweating my tail off.
Okay. Well, good. I mean, not good, but so we are both doing that. It is warm. But anyway, well, yeah. Welcome. Thank you very much for being on our Read of the Day. We have a lot of fun with this, and it's a privilege to have you. What a wonderful book. And Kaylee gave a bit of an introduction. Is there anything you would like to add to that before I start speaking with you? I tend to shy away from describing the book that I've read because I'm afraid I'll spoil something. So is there anything you would like to throw in?
Yes. So this is, as you know, we are both journalists, and this is my first foray into nonfiction writing in a book-length form. And this is really a story that was a years-long obsession of mine, that I sort of began at one layer of a story, thinking this was about 4 men who were lost at sea in a terrible storm in 1984 off the coast of Montauk. And then partly what I love about what we get to do for a living is that then the reporting process took me in just innumerable different directions that I couldn't have possibly have predicted at the outset. So it's obviously it's a story about these 4 young men and who they were and the interesting class disparities that were present on board that boat. It's about grief and loss and the survivors, especially the women and the sons who were left behind to make sense of their lives. It's about how much the East End has changed over the course of the past nearly 40 years. And I'm also in the book, as you know, as a very minor character. But it's also about how sort of the presence of an outsider, a journalist within a very kind of insular insider culture, once she starts asking questions and mucking around, how the insertion of that journalist sort of changes the story that then gets told about it.
This is probably not the most ideal way to start this interview, but in the context of what you just said, I was very moved. Yes, you did become a minor character in the book, which sometimes happens in narrative nonfiction. Sometimes it doesn't happen in nonfiction. But you did, because you met all of these people. You guys now live on Long Island. And I was just, I don't know why it affected me so much, but at the very end of the book, or towards the end of the book, you run into Pete on the street, and it's been a long time since you've seen him, and he recognizes you before you see him, or you know what I'm saying. And then
right.
He just turns and walks away. He doesn't want to talk to you. And I thought, how does that affect you as the writer, who probably didn't want to be integrated into the story, but it had to happen? And that's got to tug at your heartstrings a little bit.
Oh, absolutely. I think just as I was mentioning, initially, I thought the story was sort of one thing, right? Which is a relatively straightforward narrative of a sea story that's been written time and time again. And then obviously I dove much deeper into the psychology of it, which fascinated me, and about grief and loss and all of these survivors that were so gracious and able to talk with me. But then, of course, as my reporting took me in different directions, and I uncovered different secrets, different closely held secrets that are revealed, some of which are revealed in the book, many of which were not revealed in the book. That obviously led to an alienation among some of my main sources. And, it's been very interesting this summer, because I've been doing quite a few events here locally, which has been such a pleasure. I didn't predict that the world would be nearly as open as it is. But it's clear that I've gotten under the skin of some of the local townspeople that are not a fan of this book, and are not a fan of my interpretation of the story. I mean, by and large, all day I get these lovely emails from readers all over the country, but there's a certain sort of subset of readers here on the eastern end of Long Island that are very offended that an outsider has come in and told her version of what she thinks had occurred. And why the need for this sort of some of the personal revelations that come forth.
Right. That would be a rough situation. As someone that has never been to Long Island, an outsider, I thought you did a wonderful job balancing everything, and a very pointed job. But I get it. So one thing you just said, Amanda. I'm sorry, go ahead.
With this, I was just going to say, I'm a hugely empathetic person, and I try to tell the richness and the fullness of this story with as much empathy for all of the people involved as I could possibly conjure. My husband, actually, who's an academic, he's a sociologist, and when he writes books, he changes everyone's name. And of course, that's not the kind of work that we do unless we're interviewing a whistleblower or some type of an inside source. And when he read an initial draft of the book, he was like, well, you've got to be crazy to write this book and want to continue, living here and raising our family here.
Right.
And I feel like it's just sort of a moment in time, and people have to kind of get that out of their systems. And I do have to say, I mean, by and large, everyone's been really terrific and supportive. And it's not as though the things in this book were like closely held state secrets, but like for the people that are from East Hampton and that were enmeshed in this story, these are all known things. And that is one of the girlfriends of the young men actually said to me, if I didn't include these things, it would seem as though I almost didn't know what I was talking about. And I found that to be an interesting perspective as well.
Yeah, and it makes sense. at the same time, I think, particularly with the publishing business the way it is nowadays, you pitched a book on a sea tragedy. And as you said at the outset, people are very touched and moved and fascinated by these stories. So everyone's different. So it didn't surprise me that you were able to sell your proposal. What sort of did surprise me is, as you said, it blossomed in directions you could not have originally thought of. Did your editor or your publisher at any time say, hey, wait a minute, you're trying to write like 5 books here? Did they try to rein you in at all and just say, hey, stick to the sea tragedy? Or did it become, it obviously became what it became, but was that at any point sort of an issue of tension or anything?
You know, I sold the book based on about a 60-page proposal that was based on about 3 to 4 months of reporting. And the proposal is just sort of one layer of the story. And then I went 15 layers below that. And I think actually my editor was quite pleased with the outcome because it was far more interesting to her. And maybe because she's a woman and I'm a woman, then maybe she had predicted that it would be, right? My reporting just sort of went in all of these different directions. Meaning that as much of the drama, even though the origin of the tragedy occurred at sea, very much of this drama obviously occurs on land, both in the run up to what happened in '84 and then also the years and decades since. And I think she found that to be, in some ways a much more nuanced sort of sea story. But of course, if a reader is looking to pick up and read, The Perfect Storm 2021's version, they'll be hugely disappointed because we're on the boat for a relatively little amount of time compared to that great book, which is also great. But I think we love certain books and then, we think they're in the same genre and then we want to kind of have that experience replicated as a reader. And obviously, this is not The Perfect Storm.
As an aside, I can't remember whether I told you this or not, but when I finished talking to you for the article that ran in the paper Sunday, I think it was the next night, I was just flipping around on the television and The Perfect Storm came on. So I had to watch the whole thing again in the context of what I just, and then Jaws came on the next day and it was just this never ending thing. So, but what I was going to say, Amanda, is you mentioned an empathy, particularly with your editor is a woman, you were a woman, obviously. What resonated with me was when I was in college, I got bitten by the bug. I was going to be a rock musician, not at all what my parents had in mind. And I flunked out of school, and that's what I did for the next 14 years. And my parents were so disappointed. And now we didn't grow up super wealthy or anything like that. But in your book, you capture so much of the divide, not just between the haves and the haves not in that part of Long Island, but fathers and sons who might have certain expectations on both sides of the generational gap. And it threw me. So I guess what I'm trying to say is you really touch on so many different things of the human dynamic. And I don't know, did you learn stuff about families and people that you had no idea you were going to encounter when you started writing?
Oh, absolutely. So it was so interesting because, when I pitched the story, it was about these 4 men. And I knew at the outset that there was a class disparity and that there were 2 men of much more privilege. And then there were 2 men of more of a working class background. But that was basically all that I knew and sort of the shell of who each had been. But then as I dove deeper into the narrative, in the reporting and got to interview all of these different, family members and loved ones and friends and what have you, it became so clear to me that obviously, I don't mean to say that these 4 men in '84 on this voyage were out talking about their father issues by any stretch of the imagination, right? But it became so interesting to see this pattern, right, sort of replicate itself despite the age difference, despite their class differences, that each of them really was on that boat, I think, for a particular reason. It was a search for identity. It was a search for meaning. It was often a search to kind of, be men of their own, apart from their own fathers. All had very difficult fathers, whether their fathers, had been alcoholics or hugely powerful and kind of dictatorial, or one of the young men, never had a father. He had grown up with a single mom. Another one of the young mates, Michael Vigilant, his father had died at sea 6 years prior. So they were all really kind of lacking that stable, reliable, supportive paternal figure to help kind of guide them through this next stage of their lives. And anyway, Freud would have had a field day with that, but it just, that became a theme. Obviously, I'm a woman, and so I've thought much more about the dynamic between mothers and daughters than I have necessarily maybe about the dynamic between fathers and sons. But yes, I found that just of endless fascination, because I think we can all relate to that, right? We're all remaking ourselves based on what our upbringing was like, for better or for worse. And I think we can all relate to, that's a very universal experience.
Yeah, well, you did a really wonderful job of exploring the nuances of that. Now, I'm going to throw you an off. Now, we did discuss this, but I didn't write it in the article because you're going to think I'm insane. But
I don't know.
Moby Dick might be the sea tragedy book of all time for a lot of reasons. And I remember that chapter 13 of Moby Dick is called Chowder, and it simply discusses the entire chapter, Ishmael and Queequeg eating chowder before they go to sea. As someone that likes chowder, that resonated with me. What resonated with me even more was I had never heard of a golden tilefish until I read your book, because that's what these guys were fishing for. And your descriptions of golden tilefish made me want to say, I would like to eat golden tilefish. Why can't I go somewhere and eat a golden tilefish sandwich? And then in the book, you actually kind of pull a Moby Dick and explore that a little bit. What did you learn about tilefish, and why did you, it fits effortlessly into the overall scheme of what you ended up doing. But I just found it fantastic that you got golden tilefish in there and explored it. What did you think when you were writing?
I mean, not all of my online reviews agree with your assessment, so thank you for that. I also share a golden tilefish, obsession, and found them hugely fascinating. I also love chowder, so maybe we need to come and have a meal of like a golden tilefish chowder of some sort. But
that would be nice.
No, I mean, I that's what I love about nonfiction, is that, you can kind of take the reader in these different subtopics, and then you kind of lead them back to the main narrative sometimes. And certainly golden tilefish was one of those weird obsessions of mine. But so golden tilefish, there's a restaurant in East Hampton that always has them on the menu. I had the good fortune the other evening, I was invited to a local book club, and one of the young men there is days on and 10 days off. And he had brought, freshly caught golden tilefish, and they were grilling them up, and they were having them as part of fish tacos. And golden tilefish is delicious. Most of what's caught, the tens of thousands of pounds much of it goes into the city at a few different restaurants, and then quite a bit of it is exported. And it used to just be a much more common, popular fish, in the mid 70s to the late 80s was sort of this sweet spot that these guys were in, where there was just so much of it, and it was hugely lucrative work, and they would gear up and go out and do it. But yeah, you're right. It's also just interesting how different types of fish become so commercialized and much more popular, right? Like the palate and that the sort of curiousness of like, Chilean sea bass and the origin story of that, or yeah.
Well, I think it was tremendous that you delved into that. Another aspect of Lost Boys of Montauk, that there's a great deal of mysticism about the sea, symbolism, mysticism, for a lot of reasons. What I don't understand is, and I don't want to give away too much, but Captain Stedman was, from the moment he saw an advertisement or advertisement, as y'all might say up here, for the boat Windblown, he had to have it. And even to the casual observer who might not be a mariner of any kind, the structure of ideal for what he wanted to use it for. And when he got the boat back to Long Island, his buddies and colleagues looked at it and thought, I don't know what he's doing. This boat is not what he needs. And yet he couldn't see that, even though he was a professional. Did you draw any inference as to why this boat bewitched him, if you want to use that word? And from that, extrapolate a little bit about the superstitions of the fishing industry or the sea, if you want to go in that direction.
So you're right. Michael Stedman was working as, a captain of a party boat up until the fall of 1983, and he had risen up through the hierarchy. And for quite a bit of time, he had felt like it was the moment for him to strike out on his own. And of course, that meant to have his own vessel and to be making more of the money rather than giving it away to someone else. And, he was sitting, having a beer, reading through these boat advertisements, as I would say. There was something about this boat, the Windblown, that just got him, right? And he couldn't let it go. And his wife, Mary, very forcefully, they had sort of an argument that very afternoon where she said she's a very intuitive person, and she felt like, well, this is not the boat for you. And this is ridiculous because we live on Long Island and this boat is now in Galveston, Texas. And, what are you talking about? And then, of course, a few months would go by and he buys the boat, and, he goes down to Galveston, and there's about a month where they encounter this kind of a series of technical difficulties on their way back up to Montauk from Galveston, that Mary certainly saw as signs of the boat's unseaworthiness, or there was a faded quality to it, right? It was like there were a lot of red flags if you were paying close attention, that I think at the time, the other thing you have to remember is just how young they all were, right? So Mike, Captain Mike had three boys, but he was only 32. And the other guys were 23, 19, and 18. And, certainly in retrospect, among, members of the fleet and guys that are still living out here that saw the Windblown up close and personal, they all felt like, well, what is he thinking? But at the time, many of them had retrofitted, not ideal vessels to go out and do this work. It wasn't like he was the only guy with not the greatest boat in the harbor. And certainly he anticipated, being able to make a good living that spring, and he would make the necessary changes, and life would go on. And I think more so, I'm so struck by his decision to stay out as long as he did. Like, obviously, if I could sit and talk with him in the present day, I would want to know what was the timing issue there, because the rest of the fleet had already made it back in. And had there been a technical difficulty, or what was it that had them staying out? Were they just catching so many fish that they decided to stay out? It's obvious. It's often a game of like playing with fire a little bit, and that adrenaline that fuels a lot of these commercial fishermen, because it's very, very dangerous work. But yes, it's kind of a mystery. And Mary, actually, his wife, in the book, I talk about how she believes that if you're paying close enough attention, when you look back on your life, when you're about to die, each of us will leave sort of a series of clues, sort of hinting at what's to come. Obviously, Mike was a very young man, so this was very, very dramatic. But that's just interesting to think about, the sort of these decisions that we make, and obviously those terrible consequences in this story. Obviously, it wasn't just his life that was lost, but three young men as well.
Amanda, you will certainly appreciate this, but we have found over, a year and a half of doing this book club, that a lot of the folks that tune into this are writers themselves or would like to write books, and they are fascinated by the craft and the route to publishing, if you will. This was your first book, right?
Mhm.
So what did you find different about writing a book than writing a journalistic piece or a magazine article that you didn't anticipate and maybe went, what's going on here?
Yes. Well, I feel like at this stage of my career, I can write a newspaper or magazine story and know kind of the parameters and the constraints and how much reporting goes into it. And then I sit down and I write the thing. And obviously for this, I probably reported enough for 2 or 3 books of this length.
Right.
And it became an issue of what to eliminate and pare down and get rid of. There are several different other, subplots that weren't explored here as well. And I think for me, truly, unlike a newspaper magazine story, was that the structure of this was so confounding because, we're moving around in time and space so much. We're in 1984, we're in the present day, which has changed so remarkably here on the East End from what it was in the 80s. We're in the 50s and 60s and what it meant to come of age during that era with those silent generation parents. So yes, the structure of it was the most confounding, and the part about my journalism background that prepared me not at all to tackle that beast, because it's really different than writing even a 5 or 10,000 word magazine piece. How to braid all of these different narratives together, for sure.
You speak of subplots that you didn't.
How many books have you written?
I'm sorry, I garbled there.
I was asking how many books you've written.
Gosh, I don't know how many I've written. I've had 3 published, which is not a real great success rate over the course of 2 agents and stuff. But anyway,
it's more than I've written. Great.
Yeah, but I'm considerably older than you are. So, but anyway, most of the ones that I've written that were not published are fiction or novels. And it's just a remarkable. I applaud anybody, published or not published, and I think you will do the same thing, that tackles a manuscript and at some point types the end, because it is a hell of a hard job and it's a hell of a hard business to break into. So if you're trying and you've done it, boy, you should applaud yourself on that alone. Wouldn't you agree?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yes. Which is why I love the reporting part and talking to people and gathering material, and the solitary aspect of writing is obviously far lonelier and arduous a task. I mean, it's really, really hard. Yeah. Absolutely.
I think it's only fair that I acknowledge to everyone who's been kind enough to tune in that as a professional journalist for almost 30 years now, I would like to announce that the print version of your story has Rick Coster misspelling Captain Stedman's name throughout the article. So that's some professionalism for you. And you were so gracious when you said, by the way, it's not how he spells his name. I was mortified, but thank you for not being mean about that.
Oh, no. This happened. I just, given that it's the captain of the boat and I'll never stop thinking I wanted to correct that, at least in the online version. That's for sure. So thank you.
I did at top speed. I'm a horrible person, but anyway.
Oh, stop. Not a problem.
That was just necessary to set that straight for everyone. It's about 7 o'clock, so I'm not sure. It looks like we do have some people that want to ask questions. So Kaylee, I'm not sure if you want to.
You actually had a perfect transition right there for me when you brought up the the misprint, Rick, because Audrey asked, would Rick please tell us what paper carried the article he mentioned on Sunday? I have it right in front of me. So
Did you highlight the misspelled word?
I didn't highlight it. So it's on the day, and you said it is online already, correct? Because this goes out the day it's been, yes.
www.theday.com.
Yes. So it's on the day, Lost at Sea. So this is it. I happen to have it right in front of me because I'm a nerd.
Great questions. Questions. Love it.
Yes. So that was perfect transition right there. All right. And let's get into that.
Do you want to go to audience question?
Yes. So let's,
okay.
That was actually one of the audience questions, but let's get into these other ones. Yes. All right. So first up, Justin, I understand that Amanda's book also addresses the changing socioeconomics of the East End in that era. Could you expand on that a bit? 1984 was the year of Reagan's landslide, re-election, and Wall Street's bull run that had already begun by then. Thus, had the demographics in this part of Long Island already started to change at this point? So kind of the socioeconomics around the time that you were focused on.
So yes, Justin, thank you for that question. That particular time period was of endless fascination to me here on the East End for many reasons. So that just as he rightly points out, this is really before, 84 is before the crazy Wall Street money started coming out and building these McMansions that we see now. It's certainly decades before the tech money would come out and really alter the landscape and have houses selling for tens of millions of dollars. What was so interesting to me about even, the Connects and their peer group within the Maidstone Club, which is the private club in East Hampton that's also in the book, was that a lot of the fathers had come of age during the GI Bill, and they had gone to Harvard or Yale or wherever on the GI Bill. And many had come from not very fancy families. And that by sort of going and getting these degrees, many of them became lawyers and financiers and what have you, that sort of catapulted them into this realm. But meaning, a house in East Hampton then, even south of the highway, was $20,000 or $30,000. Whereas now it's truly stratospheric, and either that has to be family, wealth, or people making insane amounts of money that I can't even imagine what that would be like. But anyway, that's because I'm a writer, as Rick can attest. But, what was so interesting about 84 too, Justin, was that these guys were really chasing a dream, and I feel like a reader had recently written to me that what would have really been a tragedy would have been if these four men, particularly Mike Stedman and Dave Connick, if they had become stockbrokers or private equity guys or hedge fund directors, and that actually they have the courage and the conviction to follow their dream and do the work that they love most. So there's just something really kind of beautiful about this era on the East End. And I grew up in Los Angeles. And anyway, I wish I had been here actually for that era, because I think I would have really liked it. I hope that answered, his question.
No, I think it, yeah, that's so interesting. And especially that whole point about the dreams at that time, and that someone pointed out, like, imagine if they hadn't followed that route. Interesting.
Right, exactly.
I'm actually so excited. I was telling Rick I just got my coffee today, so I'm so excited to dive into dive. Haha, we got a little pun going on. Okay, we're gonna take away from the C puns because that's gonna get terrible fast. Donna has a question for you. Have you received a response from anyone at the Maidstone Club? And did you find a favorable reaction from anyone there, or did they find fault with your treatment of this very prestigious club? So
thank you for that, Dawn.
Question from the Maidstone.
For the Maidstone, yes. So the Maidstone is in a chapter of the book, and it's the Connicks, who are the parents of Dave Connick, who was the blue-blooded young man who was on this boat. The Maidstone is sort of another character in this story. I have not gotten an official response. I have gotten invitations to speak at a couple of different private clubs. The Maidstone has yet to reach out, but I'm available if they would like to have me speak. I have heard from several kind of friends and friends of friends, for the most part, really lovely feedback. A gentleman just interviewed me at Guildhall on Sunday, David Netto. He's a member of the Maidstone. I think it's okay. I mean, I'm sure that there are a few feathers that I've ruffled, no doubt. But I think that was sort of my job in this instance. It's a very white, privileged place. It was just so interesting to explore both what that club had been and also the modern day version of what it is now and what it means to people here now.
Absolutely. Moving on, I'm kind of going to combine two of these questions together because I think that these are both great and work together. So, Dave, and the action, if so, have you do you fiction project work? So, kind of just questioning what's going on. Are you thinking about any future projects?
Yes, thank you for those questions. I unfortunately, unlike Rick, my brain doesn't work in terms of fiction. I just don't even think in that way. Maybe I wish it did, to be totally honest, given how many hundreds, not hundreds, but dozens and dozens and dozens of people I interviewed for this book. I am thinking about my next project, my years-long project. I think it'll take me, another 2 to 3 years or what have you. And I'm looking at a few different projects. I'm kind of leaning away from stories necessarily based here. Although if anyone is listening and they have a great idea in the Northeast, I would love to explore that. I feel like this story to me checked so many boxes, right? Of local interest and things that had always fascinated me, that it's a very high bar for me to find a story based here that would do that same thing. And for the reasons we've previously discussed, it's also tricky to live in the place around the people that you're writing about and run into them when you're doing your grocery shopping. So without entering a witness protection program. So I might veer into another geographic area for my next excavation. But yes, I am looking for ideas, and people have reached out. I mean, there are a lot of skeletons based around here. So my email is available on the World Wide Web.
I can definitely understand wanting to create a little bit of that distance. Like you said, just listening to you, like you said, all those subplots, you were kind of talking about that a little bit earlier with Rick. Is there anything that you ever want to do with some of those subplots you never got to fully explore?
So I have gotten quite a bit of different interest from a few folks in Hollywood, and that would certainly be an opportunity to explore maybe a fictionalized version of this and bring in some of those elements that didn't make it into the book and some of the characters that didn't make it into the book. But I still have the option, and it's been a lot of meetings, but not a lot coming of it. So I'm working on that aspect of it at the moment, but unfortunately I don't have any news to share just yet.
Absolutely. It's a process, as I'm sure, creating and researching. I can't even imagine how long, as being a journalist and finding that story and looking for everything, has been.
Amanda, I have a question. Would you,
Yes.
I know you and your family just got back from vacation in California. Would you specifically just pick out an area where you wanted to spend time and then try to find a topic there so you could sort of have a working vacation, if you will? Does that make any sense?
Yes. So one of the ideas that I'm playing around with for my next project would actually take place in Bakersfield, California, which is in sort of the central part of the breadbasket of California. And that would be so fascinating to me because of it gets at agriculture and climate change and a part of the state that I almost have zero familiarity with, and a place where I don't live. but yeah, I mean, if I didn't have two kids in public school here and a husband, then of course I would just pack up and go move to wherever my next project is going to be for a while. But thankfully I can take reporting trips, and the telephone and Zoom are great, but there's just nothing like sitting down with someone. I so wish we were having this conversation in person, because Zoom is great for a lot of things, but there's just really nothing like sitting down and looking at someone in their eyes and having a conversation and getting a feel for a place, which you really can't do, I think, remotely.
Right. Oh,
yeah.
Can I ask you one more thing?
Oh, ask me anything. You're so sweet. I feel like your accent probably lets you get away with a whole lot that you shouldn't be getting away with. Have you found that to be the case? Like you can sort of, like maybe I need to try and have a Southern accent, because I feel like you could ask a totally ridiculous, like possibly insulting question, but with your accent, it sort of soothes. Like it's really it's great. Meaning yes, I think it's an excellent repertorial tool in your toolbox there, right?
Well,
and she's feeling me.
Well, thank you.
True.
I don't drink anymore, but I found that once we moved up here, the Southern accent increased incrementally by every 2 beers. So then it just got ridiculous. The other night I was gratified to be asked to read with some other folks in the region at a benefit for a library, and we just each picked a little bit of prose or poetry and read it. And I'll be damned if I didn't have to go right before a guy from Britain. And I thought, here I am sounding like I'm from the Beverly Hillbillies, and then this guy with a Kenneth Branagh accent followed me. And at that point I thought, this is horrible. So I'm glad you like the Southern accent, but I don't know.
Really
anyway,
for me.
Well, thank you. But what I was going to ask you is on the website.
The Brits are just so smart. Like I find them, like they can talk to you about, like they're really good at trivia. Like it's yes.
Well,
but I think Southern accent is really working for you. Alcohol or no alcohol is what I'm saying.
Well, you on your website have a playlist, like a Spotify playlist type thing of music that I don't know whether it's the music you were listening to while you were writing the book, because some of them are clearly associated with it. I would infer. So what's that all about? I found it fascinating to listen to some of that stuff, trying to wonder exactly how it fit in with you writing the book.
So that playlist kind of came about organically. People would often, many of the main characters in the story, would send me music that they'd been listening to at Mahoneyville, which is one of the local compounds in the book that you'll come to know. And the captain's son would send me a lot of the music that he remembers his dad was growing up, listening to. That would be playing a lot of like classic rock and reggae playing on his boat. And I feel like certainly for all of them, music was such a huge part of that era. So, and then an editor friend of mine, who was a huge part of this process, is also a big music person. I personally just love music from so many different eras. And so we just started putting a playlist together, and then my publicist was reading it when we were just becoming acquainted, and she loves to put playlists together when she's reading all sorts of different kinds of books, and unbeknownst to me had started putting like her 15 songs on it, and it just sort of grew from there. So I think it's 100 songs or something, but it really captures, I think, a very particular time and a place and youth and the freedom of that and a certain set of values, and really a bygone era in this country that I have such a fondness for and wish that I had been a part of. Some good music there for sure that I can take absolutely no credit for. I just put it on a playlist.
Kaylee, did somebody else pop up with a question?
We've got some really great compliments to our writer right now.
Charles, I don't know who you are, but I love you. And this is the nice, you just totally made my night. Thank you.
So that was one of them.
Anyone like the book, I'm going to send them to Charles and be like, you have to talk to Charles because he was very moved by it.
Yeah, we got some new blurbs for your book. So Charles, and then Donna. Oh, sorry.
No.
Donna, I know it's the Zoom. We just like cut out and in. I just wanted to say I loved your book. I brought it for my son, my son-in-law, and my husband for Father's Day. Thank you for writing such an interesting and thought-provoking.
Oh my gosh, I love these people. I want to come
through the Q&A.
You guys, how often do you do this read of the day? This is every day? This is every Thursday?
No, once a month.
Yeah.
Okay.
I can read. I mean, fast, but I don't know if I could read a book a day. But
yeah,
there we go. Yeah. Our new goal: 3625 with Rick.
A book a day. Okay. All right. Rick, what is your favorite book that you read recently? Obviously, besides mine, which I know that you loved and couldn't put down. But I'm just finishing a book right now, and I need a new recommendation. I love nonfiction.
You love nonfiction?
Mm-hmm. I mean, I like some fiction, like very little fiction, I have to say. Very little fiction. I just finished Empire of Pain. I have a total Patrick Radden Keefe obsession that my husband finds a little uncomfortable. I've read everything he's ever written. And now I've just finished his podcast, which is also amazing. Yeah, anyway.
Well, I'll tell you what, none of these books are particularly recent, but are you familiar with the writer Don Winslow?
I don't think I am.
Okay. Write down Don Winslow. He's a very, very successful novelist, and he's written probably 30 books, but they are fiction, but they are very meticulously researched. He wrote a trilogy called the Border Trilogy, and it is about America's war on drugs. And it starts with a book called The Power of the Dog, then the Cartel, and then the Border. And they are so moving and so infuriating and so heartbreaking. And they are very much fact. I think it's the start of the second book. You open the page and there's a tiny print, dozens, if not hundreds of names. And then you figure out that they are the names of journalists in Mexico who were executed by the cartel members for trying to tell the truth over this 30-year period. And his reporting is beyond belief. And he slightly fictionalized it. But you might they're dark, but it'll make you think a lot about what we've got going on in this country. What do you recommend for us besides your own wonderful book?
I really recommend Empire of Pain. I think it's very, very interesting to look at the American, addiction to oxycodone and the Sackler family. And I think he did a bunch of terrific reporting on that. And right now I'm finishing up Becky Cooper's book called We Keep the Dead Close, which is about really interesting speaking of an interesting structure. She's very much inserted into the narrative and also her obsession with this murder case of a Radcliffe student and this unsolved case and how she became to be fascinated with it and kind of unpacking who she had been based on who she can track down. But really phenomenal piece of work. I really love it.
I got it. I'll be buying it immediately.
Okay.
Hey, if I send you my book of yours, will you sign it for me?
Yes. Will you send me a copy of the story that you wrote as well? Because I'm keeping a whole bunch of clips from this very strange summer of my life. And I would love to add your story to my pile of.
I will have to get a pristine copy of it because my copy has me marking out the misspelling.
Okay, that would be great.
I'm sorry.
No, I was just saying.
awesome.
I was just saying that I'm happy to send you a signed copy. That would be my absolute pleasure, Rick. Yeah.
I will, and I will send you a pristine copy without me scratching out the misspelled name.
Okay, that sounds great for my scrapbook. Thank you.
Okay.
Well, on that note, you can find Rick's copy of the article on the day, and you can get Amanda Fairbanks' The Lost Boys of Montauk. The link is on the side here. Thank you so much for joining all of us tonight for this wonderful conversation. Please check out this wonderful piece of work. Thank you both for this amazing conversation tonight.
Oh, thank you,
Kaylee.
What a pleasure. Book people, so yes. we could sit here and talk all night. Yeah,
absolutely. It was such a pleasure to have you all. Audience, thank you so much for joining us, but especially to our two panelists tonight. Just thank you so much for this vibrant conversation.
Amanda, you were great. Kaylee, you were great. Thank you, Bank Square Books. And we'll see you guys next time.
Absolutely.
Wonderful.
Have a wonderful
pleasure. Thank you, Kaylee. Thank you, Stasia. Thank you. Bye, guys.
Bye.